Hi there, I'm Jessica Rose and today I'm going to show you how to make stacking bracelets. So stacking bracelets are a really lovely project to make and fairly simple and straightforward to do from home. You can see some examples I've got here that I've already done, and I'm following a similar style. So whenever I do my stacking bracelets, I tend to do 3 or 4 using a mixture of colour combinations. That way I know they're going to look really nice on the wrist when I'm wearing them together, or if you're making them for a business, they'll look really gorgeous in your product photography. So you can see in the ones that I've made already, I've got one with slightly chunkier beads. So I've used some lapis and some moonstone and some pink sandstone. And I've also got one with thinner beads, and I'm sort of mixing up my colours. And then I've got this gorgeous strand here that I'm also going to be working on for making the bracelet today. I'm also using some gold chain. So I've got a little bit of gold chain, which I'm just going to add to the back of the piece, which is so useful for helping making a bracelet that has different lengths to it. So you can either attach the clasp at the bottom and it's a much smaller piece, or you can attach it at the top and it makes it a much bigger piece, which is brilliant if you're making them to sell because it means that they have an adjustable length. Just going to talk you through the tools I've got. So I've got my basic plier set, so I've got my cutters, I've got my chain nose pliers, sometimes called snipe nose pliers, and they are the pointed flat pliers. I've also got a ruler to measure out my bracelet, and I have some nylon wire. You can use nylon wire or tiger tail or beadalon, any wire that you like to work with, but I just use basic nylon wire. And the key thing about the wire is to make sure that it's going to thread through the gemstones that you're going to use. So one issue that we often find with gemstones is that the beads have tiny holes in them. Not all of them, but a lot of them have tiny holes. So you need to make sure that you've got the right thickness of wire to go on the inside of the beads. And it may take a bit of trial and error with that. Then I've also got my clasp. So I've got a gold filled lobster clasp that I'm using. You can use any clasp that you like for this piece. And I have some tiny little crimps here. So if you're new to jewelry making, crimps are like tiny little bead tubes that we use for attaching elements to pieces. So I'm going to show you how to use those in a little bit. Then finally, of course, I've got my gemstones and I've got some little gold balls that I'm going to use as well. So I'm going to clear my work area and we'll get on with making the bracelet. So the first thing I always do is lay out my design. So I'm just going to cut the end of my thread. So when you buy beads or gemstones, often they'll come in a strand. And so we take them off the strand. Now, because this has got a lovely sort of graduated design to it, I'm going to try and keep them roughly in place. It doesn't have to be exactly, but just a rough order to it. Then I'm going to pop them round, lay them on my beading mat. So I'm going to do a mixture of the sort of orangey beads, the grey beads, and I'm mixing some gold beads in there as well. And this is going to work really well with the stack of bracelets that I'm creating. Because again, when we're stacking them, we want to think not just about the individual bracelet, but about how they're going to look as a stack together. So I'm just going to go ahead and work on the design, and don't be afraid to spend a little bit of time at this stage, because I actually find that this often takes me the longest time out of everything, is figuring out what gemstones I'm going to use in what order to create my design. Now, another consideration, of course, is the length. So to work out the length that you need, I just really simply take a length of string or wire or anything you have, wrap it around your wrist and match it up to where it feels quite comfortable. You don't want it really, really tight. Take it off. Then using my ruler, so I've worked out my length is about 6.5 inches, or around 16.5 centimeters. So I'm not going to be really strict with that because I am creating a bracelet with an adjustable length, but it just gives me a rough ballpark of what I'm aiming for. So So once I've worked on my design and I know what I want, I'm going to take my length of nylon wire. Now this is so fine that you're not likely going to be able to see it, and that is fine. It's just a very fine piece of nylon wire. It's only 0.3 millimeters thick. So I'm just going to cut a nice generous length with my cutters or some scissors and start threading on my beads. So I'm just going to start threading on my beads one by one, and remember that at the moment both ends of the wire are loose, so I haven't created a clasp at either end, so I just need to be aware of that, because nothing worse than threading on all your beads and then pulling it and it sort of all comes off. So spend a bit of time working your design, laying it out and then threading them on, and I'll go ahead and thread these on and then I'll show you how to attach the ends. So you can see I've threaded quite a lot of my beads on now. I'm getting towards the end of my threading. I'm just going to place it onto my wrist to check the length so far. So what I do is I place it on just very carefully because I don't want them to fall off. Pinch it in the middle and I can see that I've got a little gap, and I want a little gap because I want a bit of space for my clasp and my chain. So I'm pretty much there, but I'm just going to add a couple more bits and make a few adjustments, and then I'll be ready to create my attachment. You'll also notice in the sample that I've got a briolet bead in the middle, and I like to do this quite a lot. I think it adds a really nice dimension to it. So to do that, it's exactly the same. You literally just thread your briolet on. I often start with in the middle of the piece and thread one side and then thread the other side. So don't be afraid to use briolets because they add a really nice dimension to your stacking bracelets. Okay, so now I'm happy with all my beads and I'm ready to attach my ends on. I'm going to start by attaching a piece of chain. So I don't need a lot, but just enough again to make it adjustable. I also think that adding a bit of chain to a bracelet just makes it a little bit more higher end, which is great if you're going to be selling your pieces because it just adds that extra element onto the design. So now I'm going to introduce my crimp bead. So this is the teeny tiny 1mm by 1mm bead that I'm going to just literally thread on to my nylon wire. And you can get different sized crimp beads. I just like using small ones because then they're more inconspicuous. Then I'm going to place on the end of my chain through the nylon wire as well. So the order is beads, crimp bead, then chain. Now what I'm going to do is thread my nylon wire back through the crimp, which essentially traps the chain in a little loop, which is what we want to do. So again, really, really tiny, but a simple process. You just thread the end of your nylon wire back through, and you can see that creates a loop. And my chain is in that loop. So now that I've trapped my chain in that loop, I'm just going to pull my crimp bead all the way up towards the chain. So then it's really trapped in a very small loop, which is what I want. I still want a little bit of wriggle room so that the chain can move about a little bit, but not too much. Then I'm going to take my chain nose pliers, place them over my crimp and push them down once firmly. You can see by squashing that crimp, it's holding everything in place. So now if I pull on any of it, it's not going to go anywhere. So that's nice and secure. Now that's all that's left to do is to cut off the excess nylon wire. Make sure you do cut the right one. I'm just going to take my cutters to get right in there. And then if I pull the beads down, you can see that I've now attached one end with my chain. Wonderful. So now I'm ready to do the other end. So I've got chain on one side and I want to add my clasp to the other side. So it's exactly the same process with our crimp beads. So take our crimp bead again, thread it onto the nylon wire. And this is when it's good to have some excess nylon wire to work with so you're not feeling too cramped. Then on my clasp, my lobster clasp, there's a little loop at the end. I'm just going to thread that on too. And I'm going to go ahead and thread the nylon wire back through the crimp. So this process, unsurprisingly, is called crimping and is used for all types of jewellery making, bracelets, necklaces and so on. Now this time, because I've already done one side, I want to get everything nice and snug fit down here. So what I'm doing is I'm just pulling my nylon wire to close that gap. And again, we still want a little bit of wiggle room. Want to make sure that we can move our bracelet. And once I'm happy, I'm going to get my chain nose pliers, so they're the pointed end ones. Just go in over the crimp and push it once firmly. The reason why I say once is if you keep going at it a bunch of times, you can quite easily break the crimp, which means you have to do the whole thing again. So we don't want to do that. Then I'm going to take my cutters and cut off the final bit of excess wire. And finally, I'm ready to attach my clasp to my chain. And there we have a lovely stacking bangle. We can see our other ones here and that they are going to look lovely together. One thing I just wanted to point out on these samples is that there's a little bead on the end, which is a nice little bit that I like to do. So for that, I just take a head pin and wrap a bead onto the end of the chain. That's an optional addition. So if you have some basic wire wrapping skills, you can give that a try too. So good luck with playing around with your stacking bracelets. Do come and show me what you make. I'd love to see your ones. We have a community, a Facebook community called Jewellers Academy. So if you type in Facebook Jewellers Academy, you can come and find our group, and there's lots of lovely jewellery makers on there, so you can come and share what you've been making. So do come over and show us what you've made. I'd love to see your pieces too. So that's how to make your bracelets. Do have fun with them. They are very enjoyable to make, very satisfying, and wonderful to sell as part of a jewelry business as well. Of course, I've used gemstones, but you can use any beads or anything that you have to hand. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you'd like to learn more, do come and check out the other tutorials over on the Jewellers Academy website, and we have a bunch here on YouTube for you too. All right, see you in another video soon. Bye for now.